Good evening. Welcome to our conversation about Wild Goose Dreams by Hansol Jung. My name is Deborah Wise. I'm Artistic Director of Underground Railway at Central Square Theater. We live streamed a reading of Wild Goose Dreams on Monday night. And if you missed it, you can still see a recording of the play by visiting our website, where you'll also see what else is coming up as part of Central Square Theater's Art is Our Activism online series. So I'd like to, before we get started, to thank those of you who have donated to this evening's event. Central Square Theater uses a unique profit sharing model to support our creative teams, and your donation today directly impacts how actors are staying employed in the time of COVID. If you're able, please donate at centralsquaretheater.org/support, and thank you. I'd like to take a moment to thank our community partners for tonight's event: the Korean Cultural Society of Boston, the Boston Asian American Film Festival, and the Asian American Theater Artists of Boston, which was co-founded by one of our guests this evening, Sarah Shin. Sarah, welcome. Want to join us?
Hi.
Hello, hello, hello. And welcome to you too, Sherry. Sherry Turkle has frequently led conversations at Central Square Theater because of our science theater partnership, Catalyst Collaborative at MIT. Welcome, Sherry. Sherry founded MIT's Initiative on Technology and Self and has written widely and deeply about the topic. So a little bit about the format. Excuse me, I'm just going to say something. I'm hearing an echo. Does anyone else hear an echo whenever I speak? No? Good. That's excellent. I asked each of our guests to first give her reactions to the play. And after a brief conversation, we'll start taking your questions. And as questions occur to you, please enter them in the chat box at the bottom of your screen if you're on Zoom. If you're watching this on Facebook, you can use the comments section. All right, great. So Sherry, we'll begin with you. Now, the titles of your books, which I've read, like Alone Together, really seem resonant with Wild Goose Dreams. And so it's perfect that you're here. And I'd like to ask you, what really interested you most about the reading, and how did you experience the play connecting with your work?
Well, I love this play, and I really encourage anyone who hasn't seen the play to see it. I was deeply, deeply moved by this play. And I thought it was that rare play, and this was a total surprise to me, where doing it in Zoom really brought out the themes of the play, because the characters are trying to connect online and they're frustrated, as I think we all are, as we try to move past technology to reach the full embrace of the human, now more than ever. And watching them struggle to find each other in the real time of the play, as they were trying to do that in Zoom, try and fail again and succeed a little, but sometimes only when they turn the lights out, strangely, to simulate being together. It was for me just stunning. It was for me moving. So when it's dark and they're vulnerable to each other, and they kind of simulate this vulnerability in their physical presence by turning off the lights, they're able to talk. And so the constraints in this case, the fact that they were only able to perform the play in Zoom, I think for me made the play more alive.
Huh.
And, the play, to the point that I actually thought the play had been written for the time of Zoom to make that point, and then I realized, no, not at all, it had been written for the stage. So, I mean, the play for me was a kind of really a revelation. Second, in terms of my own work, in any time, this play is about missed connections. the scene of going through so many messages, pop-ups, Instagrams, Twitter, they're for you, but they're not really sent to you or for you. You're looking for things that are there to look at, but it's designed so that you're not really able to look at it, and you can't stand having nothing to look at, because then you might have to look at yourself. I mean, the play is all about that, and that was very poignant. And it completely captured the futility of some aspects of online life, where you do it, you're caught up with it, but somehow in the course of doing it, you lose yourself. And yet the two main characters in the play, and this is what makes the play, I think, you know, and in the end, is that two main characters find something that is really in between reality and projection, physicality. Sort of like Romeo and Juliet, they can't communicate, and yet the play is only about a life of constant communication. The third thing that struck me, and this is where I'll end, is that the technology can make us forget what we know about life. It can make us forget what we know about life. And because the new communication has given the possibility of leaving the fantasy somehow that this long distance love is that you can as a family. So he's constantly trying to reach what he starts to think of as his fake wife and his fake daughter, yet he knows what technology won't, that they are his real family. And in the end, his daughter knows this as well. So I thought the play showed that we live this curious double existence where technology conspires to try to teach us what we know about life, and where we have to. I was just blown away by this, obviously.
Well, that's great. And I forgot to mention, Sherry, that you're on the Cape. Lucky you. And you had mentioned beforehand that there were maybe some connection issues. So I think it's really kind of appropriate that as you were talking about our attempt to reach beyond technology toward each other, every so often you would, sort of pause and then continue. Is this sort of liminal presence?
Did I come in and out? Did I come to
You're coming
a little?
In and out. You're coming in and out. But we got most of what you said. And so that's important.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Would it be better if I went on stop my video and you only had voice? That would be better.
We could try it and see.
We'll try it. Okay.
Well, now I thought of several questions coming out of what you said, Sherry. Great. But let's I'd love to get your reactions first, Sarah.
Sure. I also really, really enjoyed the play and seeing it in a Zoom format. It was just very stimulating with all the different characters, and like the chorus switching all their different characters and voices was very, very exciting. And I agree that what stood out to me was like these two characters trying to dig through the internet to find each other, or at least what they think of each other. I was thinking a lot about perception, and that what the problem, or like the issue when you come into like long distance relationships, or even like dating apps, going on Tinder and all those different the struggle to connect with people now is that we have come up with ideas of the person, and then meeting them in reality becomes a very different thing. Also, I was thinking a lot about how I felt very seen by the play because of it was like Korean characters, and it was set in Korea, and there's mentions of Korean songs and apps and places. But at the same time, I realized that my own perception of Korean culture and what I know of like being Korean is also heavily influenced by what I see on TV.
Excuse me for interrupting, but your mother emigrated from Korea, yes?
Yes, yeah, both my parents did. My dad came in the 70s when he was a teenager, and then my mom came like in the 90s. And then I was born here. So, and we live like, I mean, I don't know how to explain. Like, do I live in a Korean American household? I don't know how to explain what that is, but I definitely am Korean American. And have grown up like eating Korean food, learning, understanding Korean. But for me personally, like speaking Korean is just an awkward thing. I totally could do it if I was forced to, but it's awkward. And I grown up watching TV shows, Korean TV shows, for forever. My mom is watching it right now, in the other room. And I was thinking a lot of like watching the play, I felt like there were so many things that stood out as very specific, and I felt like I got the Easter egg, and it was so exciting to see that representation in theater. But at the same time, there was the specificity I felt like led to a universality, and I was seeing aspects of the play and the characters that did not make me think of Korean culture, but just made me think about the technological culture that I live in right now. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons I fell in love with the play is that because it felt like, as the playwright herself says, Jung, that she was told she wasn't going to get a play produced in this country if it wasn't about American characters. She said, but I wrote this play about Korean characters. And in a country where she felt it related to America, and it was an American story because there are so many people here who feel like their roots are somewhere else, and
Yes.
so that seemed really interesting to her. But I agree with you that it's the country we all live in is this digital country of digital world of digital communication, and as you were both speaking, both of you, you both talked about a similar dynamic. You, Sarah, ideas of a person versus the reality of that person. And Sherry, you mentioned that we live in this double existence. And it occurred to me after speaking with both of you the other day that there are connections between what I would imagine anyway as the migrant experience and the experience of being in the world of digital communication, in the sense that it feels like in both worlds, people are finessing their appearance, their profile, in relationship to their own maybe more deeply experience of identity. I wondered if you all had more to reflect on about that.
Yes, Sherry.
Oh, I'd like to just, I've taken off my image, so maybe my voice will be clearer. I wanted to say on the issue of the double self, the second self, that what I found in my research is that online, people create an avatar of the self. Even when they think they're presenting themselves, they're creating an avatar of themselves. And I've found people during COVID who will say, it's like every day on Zoom, it's not even me anymore, it's my avatar that's going out. So I think that whether it's the immigrant experience or whether it's the self you're presenting, it's very hard to have an authentic sense of yourself when you're online all the time presenting a self. the experience of it, even when you're trying to be you, is of a kind of presentation, a constant presentation, because you're able to mediate and edit and create this other kind of creature. And I think that, I'd be really interested in what Sarah, has to say about that as the immigrant experience. But that's what I felt when I saw the characters in the play, kind of trying to shape, when I saw the immigrant from North to South Korea trying to describe becoming South Korean, I saw her trying to create a new avatar that could be South Korean, who could be South Korean.
Yeah, get your mom in here, Sarah.
She doesn't want to be on camera. She doesn't want to be on she's not ready. But I mean, I definitely was thinking about my parents while watching the reading too. My parents as from coming to Korea to the US and what they kind of had to let go and kind of create a new identity in a way, or rebuild themselves. I was also thinking about the particularly for South Korean, the relationship between North Koreans and South Koreans. And I guess from what I know, there's such a fascination with what is in North Korea and what North Korea is like. It's very mysterious. When I was watching the reading with my mom, we were talking about wait, there's also another drama that's out right now in Korea called Crash Landing Onto You on Netflix. That's another love story between a North Korean man and a South Korean woman. And so for some reason that's kind of something that's of interest right now.
Sherry mentioned Romeo and Juliet.
Yes, it's like that. And there are many I've grown up watching a bunch of comedy shows that have they've come up with characters to describe what a North Korean person might be like based on what videos we have access to of North Korea.
And these countries are right next to each other.
Yeah.
South Korea is the size of Kentucky.
Right. Yeah. There's so much. Well, also that's just, I think, a shout out to Korea being so quickly expanding and becoming powerful. But yeah, there's a interesting I think it's just there's a fantastical mystery about North Korea for South Koreans in particular. There was even right now the rumors of when Kim Jong-un was not seen for 2 weeks, people thought he had died, or that he had the virus or something, and people were. I remember TMZ posted an article that he died when he didn't die, and then there was on the South Korean news, we see his sister has come into the country, his brother has come into the country, something like that. And there's a lot of creating sensational news out of little things to figure out what's going on. I was also thinking about that.
I was very interested in the way in which North Korea and the need to get back to North Korea, to find your father, to find your roots, to find some sort of authenticity, because everything you've created in South Korea has been kind of the creation of an avatar in a way. And she feels that she must get back to some kind of primitive self that can only be found in this communist country, as though there's a kind of primitivity that will allow her to find an authenticity. And that was so striking, that that this totalitarian regime is presented as the place you can find an authentic self because it doesn't have the technology.
Yeah.
And so the fact that it's totalitarian, or the fact that it's that things are so limited, in a way becomes almost a Rousseauian thing, because it doesn't have the technology. It's the technology that's presented as corrupting in some way and preventing her from reconnecting with herself. And when she goes back and reconnects with her roots and somehow settles down to who she is, then she can come back and restore herself and find her love and find her mature adulthood, really. So the whole connection of technology to as interfering with finding your authenticity as a person, even more than a totalitarian regime would do, I thought was fascinating. And it had to do in this play with the constant disconnection and constant interruption and constant TikTok and constant, interruption that doesn't let her or anyone connect with themselves, kind of going down the rabbit hole of your phone, and how everybody is constantly holding it and being drawn to it, and it makes you want it more and more and more. It's presented as an addiction. So she needs to leave that addiction to go back to herself. I thought that was also fascinating. North Korea as kind of a Rousseauian paradise. It was very.
It's also the home. I love the way Jung uses so intelligently the contradictions of, there's a stage direction that says Nanhee goes back to the fatherland. And of course, what we really mean here is the fatherland. I love it that this is a dark romance with two father-daughter stories in the middle of it, and also a play about technology. I mean, it's so original in the way in the layers in which it's constructed, and it's part of what makes it so moving. So, but you're right, I hadn't really thought about it that way. Her images of North Korea, when Min Sung asked her to describe it, she says, "Do you mean what's it like in North Korea?" He said, "No, what was it like in your home?" I love the way the playwright makes those is so detailed that way. And so she says, "Well, at home, mother always made us hot water before we went to bed. At home, we had no electricity, so at night it was very dark. And that's when I went out to meet my boyfriend." And Min Sung asked, "So what did you talk about?" And she said, "Well, we talked about our dreams." And he said, "Did you talk about your dreams of leaving?" He said, "No, we didn't talk about our dreams of leaving. We talked about our real dreams." Talk about real dreams. What would you do? And I loved the fact that we were able to make a discovery as we were in rehearsal. And I'm so glad you enjoyed this, Sherry, because it was one of those serendipitous discoveries, that when they went to bed, instead of trying to ask the actors to show something about sexual ecstasy with their faces close to the screen, that they would just go into the dark by covering the camera with their thumb, and we were able to do that, so that the intimacy of that scene, I think you're right, was much more poetic because we imagined it in the dark without any images.
Also, I would just want to say that we know that a thumb is covering the.
You see the hand, right?
Yes, we know that a body, you feel the trace of the blood and the body that's covering. So you actually felt the physicality of the actors, I think, subliminally, for me. So it was so powerful. I mean, it's one of the few ways on the computer that you can sense the body of another person, is if I go like this.
Right.
Yes. You see my insides. So I thought that was the most wonderful invention. Again, really using the computer, using the limitation to do something different. And I want to say that it's two father-daughter stories, but it's really three father-daughter stories insofar as her lover is kind of like a father figure. And so it's him and his daughter, she and her father, the father-daughter thing that's going on between the two lovers. And then with his death, his daughter, the play ends on the tragedy with his daughter, who will never resolve her guilt, because the heroine is given a resolution, but his daughter will have no resolution because she did betray him. And I thought that was, really, to me, that is the tragedy. And here Sarah would be able to speak of that much more, with authority, You know, all of those people who leave cannot communicate, choose not to communicate, or afraid that if they communicate, their families will be killed or tortured or whatever. And so don't communicate, and then, you know, live with the guilt of never having done what was right by their parents.
Yeah, I felt like guilt. I was the for the past couple minutes, I've been thinking a lot about guilt and how it was like the guilt of not being with her family is kind of what also what motivates her to go back to North Korea, to like make sure that they're actually getting the money, and the guilt of her like leaving them. And then at the same time we have Min Sung that's guilty about this affair and how he can't really be with Nanhee because of the guilt of leaving his family, even though they're already across the country, kind of with a little bit less guilt about that. It's interesting that we don't see that all we see is that they're happy and that they're living a better life in America. Yeah, I was thinking about, yeah.
I do love the playwright's choice to make the phone call from the wife be one in which, and I felt Paige Clark did this beautifully, was it was clear to us that actually the lies that they were telling each other by keeping separate, by doing this for their child, by not really being in communication, it was just costing them. And at first I felt in the play that, oh, maybe the wife is just a shallow person, but she's actually wasn't presented that way when we really heard her voice. She was saying, here I am at the airport. I thought perhaps I'd be doing something different, but I'm deciding right now, I think I'm tired of being small and tired of making you small. I'm going to go to Texas with Jimmy. So my heart really went out to her as well. It felt like everyone was caught in this web of making each other small.
Yeah.
But that's what Zoom does. I mean, again, just to make my point that this technology made this play like resonate. You know, all of my students, I got a chance to meet them for 4 weeks before we switched. They were so big. They were so big in my classroom. And then they got tiny. They got postage stamped. And this, I mean, I think this play interrogates us to say, are we using technology to make each other small? Are you hearing me?
Yes, absolutely. You're coming better.
Are we using technology to make each other small? That is the question. Or, you know, are we using technology? The dream is that we're using technology to make each other bigger. But are we using technology to make each other small? And those set pieces where the TikTok and the Twitter and the waking and the Instagram and the were heartbreaking, because the people who were using them were being made, and the dating app and he wants to see you, he's lying to you anyway. Everybody involved in that was being made smaller and smaller and smaller. Nobody was being made bigger when they picked up their phone. So it was a very, and it was done very subtly, but everybody needed to come together in some way, or to do something violent to their body in order to be made larger, I thought.
Or to be, it felt as you were speaking, I was thinking, what were the antidotes, the ways out of being small? It's felt like being seen, being truly seen. And it seemed like people were seen and heard most in the dark.
Or with music, maybe also.
Yes.
Celebrity. He had to become a celebrity on the technology. But the only path the technology gave him to be seen was to become a celebrity, which that was a lot for me to think about. Mm-hmm. And then to kill yourself publicly was a way to be seen.
I think the comparison with Romeo and Juliet isn't bad because um, there is the tragedy, but also you feel, or at least I feel in the play, a great promise. The love that the father expresses to his daughter in telling that goofy story at the beginning that ends with, and I hope if you have a choice between family and flying, you choose flying.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm expressing my love to you by saying that. Um, and then the last line of Nanhee's, and she says, "Go fly." And she's had the vision of Min Sung telling her, "I'm all right with that if you want to go on and actually love and be loved by someone else." I get the feeling that she's ready to be seen by someone else in a way that maybe she wasn't ready with Min Sung. It's it's a very wise play. I'm looking down at the screen. Excuse me, just to see if Kathy has any questions for us from our audience. But I do want to say for those people who don't know that we've talked a lot about the Zoom realization of the play. Um, the play itself was written by Hansel Jung was inspired by having something like a Greek chorus um, be the internet. So it could be as few as five, or it could be as many as 10, 15, 20 people personify the internet. And if you see pictures of other productions, they weave in and out of the characters a little bit like well, like the internet does, like digital technology does. We feel like we're swimming in this. And there's song and dance numbers, some of them, or it's just this um, context that's always present, humming um, around them. Um, it's very different. And she wanted it. She envisioned productions in which there would be no technology, no projections, no even accompaniment. That all the singing would be a cappella, and or acoustic. Um, uh, but as soon as somebody describes an emoji, I feel like we all know exactly where we are.
Right. Well, that was another very interesting thing about the production is that we don't need to see a projection to know that it's a dating app and exactly what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
We need a fragment of a conversation on a dating app to completely know that this relationship is going no place and that this is going to be is just a soul deadening thing happening.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I thought that again, what the limitations of the production did was to remind us how much we have internalized this medium, so that all you need is somebody kind of imitating an an internet intervention, reminding you to wake up, bling bling, and you are completely into everything you hate about your phone. So it the play reminded me, as you know, and this is like my business, so why do I need reminding? But it reminded me in a very visceral way of how triggered I am by the smallest things about online life, and how upsetting some of them are, how gratifying it's been in this time of quarantine to be able to meet with people online, to do things like this, to reach out, but how some things about the way in which the phone sucks us in are really so good to be away from, and a pleasure to be away from, and important to get away from. And I think people are discovering this. And this play, I was triggered by those parts of the play where I felt that all coming back. And I think that the playwright should see this version and think again how she wants to produce it.
Something that you've said in your books, Sherry, that I remember and find interesting to turn over and over in my mind is this notion that we've come to a point where we sacrifice conversation for what we perceive as connection.
Yes.
and that the aspects of conversation that require silence, uncomfortable silence, boredom, stumbling over words, or inability to express, having the patience, cultivating the patience to listen to someone try to I just got a message from a text message saying, do I see my colleagues' statements in chat? And I don't. So, so forgive me when it's, here she comes. All right. Well, I'll just finish my thought while Kathy's getting herself in gear here. Where was I? Oh, yes. All the ways in which real communication and intimacy embraces human foibles and vulnerabilities.
Yes.
Then we get rid of all that with the cleanliness of technology.
Right.
And then we begin to think that way of connecting is right. Is real human connection.
Right.
It masks itself. It looks like it.
Right. Well, I mean, I think in this play, you see characters who don't want to be vulnerable. And so it's a big risk for them to meet in person. They try to meet in person and without meeting in person, but they meet in person. And then now, his asking her to stay over. I mean, he apologizes for doing, I'm sure you don't want to, and her being vulnerable to him and the ways in which they allow vulnerability really signals to the audience that they're willing to have a relationship. Yes. That is something that's the tremendous step for them, is that they're willing to allow vulnerability.
Yes, yes.
Which is what the phones are allowing them to ignore.
And that's the hope. Sarah, I feel like I've been chatting a lot. I was going to turn to Kathy. I don't want to get in the way of anything you might have wanted to add to that little.
I was thinking too of the second he becomes famous and has that celebrity from his video. There's the moments where he's getting all of this attention and all of these women reaching out to him saying like, oh my gosh, you're so cute and all that stuff, but that being meaningless.
Yes.
But yeah, I was just
right.
reminded of that.
Yeah. To reach her, and she's in North Korea.
Right.
So you've got some questions from our audience. This is Catherine Carr Kelly, our executive director of Central Square Theater. Are you on, Kath?
Hi, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. It's a fascinating conversation, and our listeners are interested. Couple quick things for people who are Zooming with us. Use the Q&A function, please, to ask questions. For people who are watching on Facebook, you can use the comment. We'll get them either way. So the first question is for Sherry from Betsy. Sherry, given that it is really hard and inauthentic in many ways to live online, we are in circumstances now where most of us are doing more connecting online than in person. Your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that we're doing so much that I think it's actually having two things. Some of the ways we're connecting online are bringing out a new authenticity in what we can do online. I think the internet has gotten better because people are saying, what can I really do on the internet that's really brings out the best in me? I mean, I watch Patrick Stewart every day read a Shakespeare sonnet. I watch Yo-Yo Ma every day do one of these songs of reflection on his cello. I mean, I never used to go to the internet to do something like that. I mean, I hope they do it after the quarantine is over. I mean, I think you're seeing, these are only two very small examples, but they're my examples of really people who are giving generously of themselves in a very private way. It's not exactly, it's performance, but it's not exactly performance. It's a kind of more it's in between performance and just spending a moment with them. it's a beautiful thing. It's very intimate. It's very, of course, it's a kind of performance. And Deborah will help theorize someday what it is. I'm not sure. It's very special, and the internet is very good at it. So I think on the one hand, the internet is getting better at becoming more of what it might be. And second, I think all this Zooming and Zoom cocktail parties, I had a Zoom Seder and Zoom teaching and Zoom office hours. I think that people really are waiting to get together again. They're appreciating what only ability and the full embrace of the human can bring us. So I think that maybe we'll come out of it with a deeper appreciation of face-to-face communication.
Well, that would be lovely. Her follow-up question, you may have actually already answered, but she says, in fact, how does Sherry feel about the explosion of arts online in the past few months, which you did, that's sort of what you used to talk about.
I want everything online to get better. I'm not looking, I think the internet should be a place of, I think it should get better and better. I think that the Met should have opera online all the time for free. I mean, I think we should have so much money in these organizations that should happen all the time. Theater online, arts online, ballet online. I love that. I mean, what I don't think is good is when people avoid conversation in order to be sucked into obsessively looking at their phone, hoping they don't even know what. That's the thing that Facebook tries to hook you into, that you're sort of looking for something you don't know what, it's not really for you. And that's what this play, I think, addresses. All those Greek chorus moments, people are looking for something on the internet that really isn't to them. It's for them, but not to them. And that, I think, becomes a waste of time.
Thank you. We have a question for Sarah. Sarah, is this a story that's more meaningful to an Asian American audience, or do you feel it's more universal?
I want to say both. I think that the fact that I feel like what most people would think about Korea is K-pop, K-beauty, and maybe like Korean barbecue, and maybe now starting like Korean TV. And I think a lot of what I see on TV too, or at least what I get, is like huge, like high expectations of beauty standards and like a shininess and a polish that comes from a lot of Korean media, at least from my perspective. And also because I don't see myself as beautiful and as perfect as what I see on TV. But I felt like this play in particular was, as many plays do by like Asian American playwrights, it's just like breaking down expectations. I think like even the perceptions that Min-sung has towards Nan-hee, and Nan-hee has towards Min-sung about South Korean jokes, North Korean jokes, I felt like they were just breaking down expectations from each other, which I think for people that might they both look Korean, but that they have totally different backgrounds. I felt like to see that on a stage was very meaningful for, especially, like, I think that does a lot for Asian American people, for Asian American theater makers.
I love the way that, and I know I've said this before, but I think it's worth saying again. I love the ways in which it feels like a very American play about characters living in Asia, mostly. I mean, there's a reference to some that have moved to the States, but I feel it feels so rare. And I know that our cast members really loved getting into these roles. You mentioned a couple things that I thought, if one had the opportunity to stage this, you mentioned a couple things that were very specific to Korean pop culture that I thought some of our audience might be interested in hearing. Like, for instance, the ways in which pop artists, artists, our stars, are so revered, and there's under tremendous pressure. And there's even been suicides of people who have this big public presence.
Yes.
And Anyway,
like like K-pop groups, they're literally called idol in Korea, which, so like being an idol, they're like being worshipped by fans. And I think the internet with commenting and all the way we interact is very intense everywhere, but in Korea in particular, I feel like it can be very overwhelming. And I think there is just like a very, very intense amount of pressure for Korean celebrities where they cannot talk about their dating life, or for like K-pop groups in general. A lot of them, I think it's changing now, but a lot of them like are not even allowed to date, because they want to be perceived as like single and like available to their fans. There's I love being Korean, and I love Korea, but Korea is also crazy.
well, we don't.
That's like 1930s and 1940s Hollywood movie stars. I mean, that's not. I remember 1950s, 60s.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not so. That keeping the fantasy alive is not
For
so,
sure. Yeah.
True. So I have a few more questions for you,
Yes,
Sarah.
yes.
This is a hot topic. This is from Facebook. One of the cast members mentioned a friend. This was after the reading on Monday. She had growing up, who was in a goose father situation. Yes, it was Lisa. Have you ever encountered the concept of goose fathers, being Korean American? Do you think this is very prominent? Do you think this is a very prominent theme for families who have immigrated?
Yes. I actually, when I was in high school, there was my mom's friend, like childhood friend, had he was a goose father. They were my mom and the guy, best friends growing up, and then his wife and 2 children ended up living with us for pretty much like 3 years while I was in high school, and now they're like attending US colleges. I think the mom went back to Korea, but it was very, I think the idea of like a goose father is actually very, very common. And amongst like my mom's friends, there's a lot of people where they've recently come to America to go to school, or have just sent their children to go to school in America. I think it's very interesting and very, very common. I don't know much about I don't personally know about the hardships of that, like how the experience of like how difficult that is, but it definitely is common. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. I have another question for you. Sarah, I'm wondering how social media or the internet has affected the way in which you have navigated connecting with fellow Asian American theater artists.
Yes, for me, also I think it's helped a lot. I've connected and met with so much more people, and at first I was thinking a lot about like, who are the Boston people? But now that everything's virtual, I'm like reaching out to people all over the country and getting to know people all over and seeing how we can help each other or work together on something. I think there was something more. Can you say the question again?
Certainly. How social media or the internet has affected the way in which you've navigated connecting with your fellow Asian American theater artists.
Okay. Yes, it reminded me May is also Asian American Heritage Month, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So that's being on the internet, and now especially there's also just like an overwhelming amount of I feel like Asian American theater makers and artists and leaders creating amazing content right now that is honestly overwhelming, because it's like, how can I be a good supporter for all of these things at the same time while also creating a balance for myself and not be on the internet all the time. I'd say there's many things that are going on that are so exciting and all at the same time. It's inspired, having the push of going on virtual hasn't like pushed me to produce a series right now. That's actually starting tomorrow too, called AATAB Online. That's supposed to be a whole virtual reading series by Asian American playwrights, mostly in Boston, and
great.
mostly getting Asian American actors involved. So tomorrow's actually Quentin Nguyen Dui, who was in the reading on Monday.
Yes,
It's his
yes.
play. So the social media is and the internet is pretty much how I've been able to operate using through AATAB. Also because I travel a lot and not in Boston all the time, and I'm in Pennsylvania now. But so there's been a lot of good things that have come out of social media and the internet for me, I would say. Yeah.
Great, that's super exciting. This is another question that we get via email. So so speaking of this, we're getting email questions, Facebook questions, Zoom questions. I'm a little stressed now. So this one, how can we better use technology to make people bigger, truly seen, willing to share more? How can we make our online presence more in line with our authentic selves? That's a big one.
I'll just say very briefly that I think we do it by having more balance in how we use our technology. And oddly, I think this experience of kind of gorging online that we've all had, I think it's going to help us set a better balance. I feel optimistic, because the idea that you could just wake up in the morning and be on the internet all day, on your phone all day, I mean, I think that this has been the fantasy, and it turns out that actually that isn't what people want. Sarah wants to travel. Sarah wants to meet her theater makers. Sarah wants to see them face to face and be in those rehearsals, and and I want to see my students again in classrooms. I'm going to teach on Zoom next fall, and I'm mourn it. I mourn it already. I'm in anticipatory grief. So I think that we're going to do better at being online, because we now see that we need to be together face to face. And I think we're going to find that balance. And I think, I like to say that we think the internet is old because we grew up with it, but the internet is very young. It's just because we grew up with it that we think it's old, but it's a baby. And we should start thinking of it as something that it's there now in its childhood for us to make and shape, including its privacy, including its how much we use and how, and I think that we'll do better at making it more human if we treat it as our baby.
Sherry, you said something in your books. And I'm paraphrasing you now, but what I'm thinking about is when you've talked about how loneliness, being alone, cultivating an ability to be alone, is essential.
Yes.
For being able to be in conversation with someone. If you don't, to be in communication or in contact with someone. Yes. If you're not alone and comfortable with that sometimes uncomfortable situation, right. If you feel like a fear of being alone, as you've documented, when people are, for instance, in the line, they're picking up their phones because they're alone and they don't know what to do, so they just get busy on their phones, right?
Right.
That you've expressed a worry about that.
Yes.
That's the dangers of technology, and it feels like. So I'm wondering about an answer to this question too, coming back to your work, that it feels like we actually have to cultivate being offline in order to be authentic online, because we can't. I don't know how we get to that comfort level of being alone online.
Well, it has to do with the great psychoanalytic phrase that you were reaching for. Let me try to find it. Is if you don't teach your children to be alone, they'll only know how to be lonely.
Right.
And what Winnicott meant when he said that is that if you aren't comfortable in yourself, when you meet another person, you're just like looking for them to tell you who they are, who you are. And you can never really be in a mutual relationship if you're, trying to get somebody else to tell you who you are. And so we don't like people like that. We'll shun them. So we need a certain amount of the cultivation of solitude, which is different than loneliness. It's just being, you can be with a book, you can be thinking, but you can't be just always looking at a screen to be distracted.
And that's one of the things I think is so brilliant about the end of this play,
Yes.
that the playwright has chosen in this play that is so much about digital communication. The last thing that she says to her lover is "go fly," and she has lit and then blows out a match. You know, the most, anyway, I don't even have to explain it. Kathy, do you have any more questions?
I do not. I think that is it.
Okay.
It's all so fascinating, though.
Can I add something real quick?
Yes.
Going off of like how to be more authentic on social media, because I've talked about this a lot with my friends, and also like this pressure to be producing something now that we have so much more time as an artist. And I'm reminded of like how growing up my mom would make all these photo albums of like of me and my brother as babies, and now the like photo albums, they're not being made now, they're all being posted on Instagram. And I'm trying to, I know there's many people, and like I have friends that hate Instagram and don't want to like engage with it because of the negative, like all of the high pressure that we get from it. But I am trying to find the positives in it, and that it's like a photo album for all of us, for all of our lives, and it's a way to make memories, keep memories, and to share ourselves. So I try to like post as much, like post what I feel like, what I just want to share with people. Sharing myself, I think of it as like what just makes me feel good, rather than what I think people will like. I've tried to give that my advice to my friends to help make them things. I don't know. I thought that might help now too. Just do what feels good to you.
Sarah, in our conversation the other day, you mentioned a Korean word, which sounds like the last name of our playwright.
Oh yeah. Yes.
And would you mind talking about that word again?
Sure.
Because I think this came up when I asked you what felt specifically Korean to you about the play.
Yes. The word is called chung. There's no like perfect way, there's no like direct translation for it, but there was something about the play that I feel with other Korean American playwrights, Korean playwrights. And it also could just be that I'm also Korean, so I feel that connection. But I sense like there's something about Korean people that's very passionate and loyal. I think the words in the definition I found had like affection involved, and it's deeper than romantic love. There's like I would say like commitments in there. It's a dedication and duty, all of that kind of love. I feel that with my Korean American playwrights and Asian American playwrights, for sure.
It feels to me like it's woven into this play. It's one of the reasons I was very struck by that.
Yeah.
And I was glad to find that out. Boy, thanks so much, Sherry and Sarah, for joining us, and thanks to everybody out there who's watching. I'd like to invite you to come back on Monday night, yes, for the next edition in our Arts is Our Activism series. It's actually a live streamed reading of Much Ado About Nothing with 19 actors from across the country. So we wouldn't be doing that if it weren't for Zoom. It's brought to you by our partner theater company Bedlam and director Eric Tucker, with whom we will be making Angels in America next season. So yes, we are planning for the future. We have subscription packages available. Yes, we do. And you can check out that information on centralsquaretheater.org. And if you are able to contribute to Central Square Theater, and you'll be contributing really to our actors and artists to help them be employed during this time of COVID by visiting centralsquaretheater.org/support. And thank you. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you again. See you in
Bye.
person.